Why does Apple have more cash reserves than the US Treasury had at certain points? How can a company charge premium prices while others compete on discounts and still dominate? The company you think sells iPhones actually sells something far more valuable? What's the real product Apple sells that keeps customers returning, decade after decade, regardless of price? Today, we're dissecting the strategic framework that transformed Apple from a garage startup into a $3 trillion empire. This isn't about luck, it's about calculated decisions most companies are too afraid to make. Let's begin. Welcome to today's analysis of corporate strategy and brand architecture. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll examine the strategic pillars that built Apple into the most valuable company in human history. We're not discussing surface-level marketing tactics or product features. We're analyzing the foundational business decisions that created sustained competitive advantage. Here's our agenda. First, we'll establish the baseline, Apple's financial reality and market position with concrete numbers. Second, we'll deconstruct their ecosystem lock-in strategy and why it's the most powerful moat in consumer technology. Third, we'll analyze their vertical integration model and how controlling the supply chain creates both cost advantages and product differentiation. Fourth, we'll examine their premium pricing psychology and how they engineered a brand that makes price irrelevance a feature, not a bug. Fifth, we'll investigate their retail strategy and how Apple stores became the highest revenue per square foot retail spaces in the world. Finally, we'll synthesize these elements into actionable principles you can apply, regardless of your industry or business size. This is a masterclass in strategic positioning. Take notes, let's proceed. The financial reality. Let's start with facts. As of 2024, Apple's market capitalization exceeded $3 trillion. To contextualize this, Apple is worth more than the GDP of India, the world's fifth largest economy. It's worth more than the combined value of Walmart, Disney, Netflix, Nike, Coca-Cola, and McDonald's. But here's what matters more than valuation: profit margins. In Q4 2023, Apple reported a gross profit margin of 44.1%. For comparison, Samsung's gross margin in the same period was 36%. Dell's was 22%. Xiaomi's was 12%. Apple doesn't just make money, it makes disproportionate money relative to market share. They hold approximately 18% of the global smartphone market, but capture over 85% of the industry's total profit. Read that again. 18% market share, 85% of profits. This isn't an accident. This is strategic architecture. Their services division alone, Apple Music, iCloud, App Store, Apple TV Plus, generated $85 billion in revenue in 2023. That's larger than the total revenue of Nike or Starbucks. Services carry a gross margin of approximately 71% compared to 36% for hardware. Apple also maintains cash reserves exceeding $160 billion. That's more liquid cash than most countries' annual budgets. This financial fortress allows them to make long-term strategic bets that competitors cannot afford. The question isn't, is Apple successful? That's obvious. The question is, what strategic decisions created this outcome? That's what we're here to answer. The ecosystem lock-in strategy. Apple doesn't sell products. They sell an ecosystem, and that ecosystem is the most powerful customer retention mechanism in business history. Let me define ecosystem lock-in. It's the strategic design of interconnected products and services that increase in value the more of them you use, creating exponentially higher switching costs for customers. Here's how it works in practice. You buy an iPhone, it's excellent. Then you buy AirPods because they pair instantly with your iPhone, no configuration needed. Then you get an Apple Watch because it integrates seamlessly with your iPhone for health tracking. Then you need a MacBook, and suddenly all your messages, photos, and files sync automatically across devices through iCloud. Now, here's the critical point. You're not locked in by contracts, you're locked in by convenience. The friction of leaving the ecosystem, losing your purchased apps, your synced data, your integrated experience is enormous. Tim Cook has stated that their active installed base exceeded 2 billion devices globally. That's 2 billion devices continuously reinforcing the ecosystem. The average Apple household owns 2.6 Apple products. Let's examine the switching costs quantitatively. If you've purchased $500 in iOS apps over 5 years, those don't transfer to Android. If you have 200 GB of photos in iCloud with shared albums, your family accesses, migrating that data is technically possible but psychologically burdensome. If your Apple Watch tracks your health data with longitudinal trends going back years, starting over on a different platform means losing that history. Apple has engineered what economists call high switching costs, not through punitive measures, but through positive reinforcement. The ecosystem doesn't trap you, it embraces you. Compare this to competitors. Samsung phones work fine, but Samsung phones plus Samsung tablets plus Samsung watches don't create the same seamless integration. Google services work across platforms, which seems customer-friendly until you realize it means they can't create ecosystem lock-in. They've optimized for accessibility at the expense of retention. The App Store reinforces this further. Apple's 30% commission on app sales and in-app purchases generated approximately $90 billion in 2023. Developers stay because that's where the spending customers are. Customers stay because that's where the quality apps are. It's a flywheel. This strategy has a name in economic theory, network effects. But Apple's implementation is unique. They've created network effects within a closed ecosystem, combining the benefits of platform network effects with the margin capture of a vertically integrated company. The result? Customer retention rates above 90% in most product categories. Once someone enters the Apple ecosystem, they almost never leave. Vertical integration and supply chain mastery. Most technology companies design products. Apple designs everything, including the parts that go inside them. This is vertical integration, and it's Apple's hidden competitive advantage. Let me explain with specifics. In 2010, Apple began designing their own processors. The A4 chip launched with the iPhone 4. Today, Apple designs the A-series chips for iPhones, M-series chips for Macs, S-series chips for Apple Watches, and H-series chips for AirPods. Why does this matter? 3 reasons: performance, efficiency, and margin. The M1 chip, launched in 2020, delivered performance comparable to Intel's best processors while consuming 75% less power. This wasn't incremental improvement, it was generational leap. It allowed MacBooks to achieve 15-20-hour battery life, a feat no Windows laptop could match with off-the-shelf Intel or AMD chips. But here's the business angle: by designing their own chips, Apple eliminates the margin that would go to Intel or Qualcomm. Industry analysts estimate Apple saves approximately $40-60 per device by using proprietary chips. Multiply that across 200+ million iPhones sold annually. That's $12 billion in additional margin. Now let's discuss supply chain control. Apple doesn't manufacture anything themselves. Foxconn and other contract manufacturers assemble their products. But Apple controls the supply chain with unprecedented precision. They pre-purchase manufacturing capacity. Years in advance, Apple commits to buying billions of dollars of component capacity from suppliers, locking competitors out. When the 2020 chip shortage hit the technology industry, Apple was largely unaffected because they'd already secured supply. They own manufacturing equipment. Apple purchases specialized CNC machines, glass cutting equipment, and precision assembly robots, then places them in supplier factories. The suppliers operate the equipment, but Apple owns it. This gives them quality control and protects proprietary processes. Let me give you an example. The unibody MacBook enclosure. Apple invented a manufacturing process using precision aluminum milling that was so advanced, they had to place their own equipment in supplier facilities and train the workforce themselves. Competitors couldn't replicate it for years, not because the design was patented, but because the manufacturing capability was proprietary. This vertical integration extends to retail. Apple operates over 500 retail stores globally. These aren't franchises, Apple owns and operates every single one. This gives them complete control over the customer experience, from the moment someone walks in to the post-purchase support. Contrast this with Dell, HP, or Samsung, who rely on third-party retailers like Best Buy. Those companies have zero control over how their products are presented, explained, or supported at point of sale. Apple controls everything. The financial impact: Apple stores generate over $40 billion in annual revenue with the highest sales per square foot of any retailer in the world, approximately $5,500 per square foot. Tiffany & Company, a luxury jeweler, does about $3,000. Most retailers are below $500. Vertical integration also enables speed. When Apple wants to change something, a component, a supplier, a manufacturing process, they can do it quickly because they control the decisions. Samsung, despite being a massive conglomerate, has to coordinate between divisions that function as separate companies. Apple doesn't. This is why Apple can launch a product category like AirPods and scale it to $12 billion in annual revenue within 3 years. The organizational alignment, supply chain control, and vertical integration allow them to move faster than anyone else at their scale. Premium pricing psychology. Apple charges more than everyone else, and people pay it. Why? This isn't about product quality alone, it's about constructed perception and strategic brand positioning. Let's start with a principle from behavioral economics. Price-quality heuristic. Consumers use price as a signal of quality, especially in categories where quality is difficult to assess objectively. Smartphones, laptops, and headphones are complex products. Most consumers can't evaluate processor architecture or driver impedance, so they use price as a proxy for value. Apple understood this from the beginning. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was selling low-margin products, competing on price with Dell and HP. Jobs killed most of the product line and repositioned Apple as a premium brand. The iMac, launched in 1998, was priced higher than comparable PCs, but it was designed like no other computer, translucent, colorful, iconic. The strategy worked. By pricing above the market and delivering differentiated design, Apple signaled, "We are not a commodity." Let's examine the iPhone specifically. In 2007, the original iPhone launched at $599. Critics called it outrageously expensive. The best-selling phone that year was the Motorola Razr at $150. But here's what Apple understood. They weren't competing with phones, they were creating a new category. And in new categories, there's no reference price. Apple could set the anchor. Fast forward to 2024. The iPhone 15 Pro Max starts at $1,199. Samsung's Galaxy S24 Ultra starts at $1,299, matching Apple's pricing. But here's the critical difference. Apple sells tens of millions of units at that price. Samsung has to offer promotions and discounts to move volume. Apple doesn't discount, ever. Why? Brand discipline. Apple has trained consumers to expect no discounts. When a product is on sale, it signals surplus inventory, declining demand, or desperation. Apple maintains pricing integrity across all channels. The iPhone costs the same at an Apple store, Best Buy, and carrier stores. This prevents channel conflict and maintains perceived value. Compare this to Android manufacturers who launch flagship phones at $1,000 plus, but within 3 months, they're discounted to $700. Consumers learn to wait. Apple consumers learn the opposite. The price won't drop, so if you want it, buy it now. Let's discuss another psychological mechanism, the halo effect. Apple's premium pricing on flagship products creates a halo that elevates the perception of their entire lineup. The $1,199 iPhone 15 Pro Max makes the $799 iPhone 15 seem reasonable by comparison. The $2,499 MacBook Pro makes the $999 MacBook Air look like a bargain. This is anchoring a cognitive bias where the first price you see influences your perception of subsequent prices. Now, here's what makes Apple's pricing strategy brilliant. They maintain margin while appearing accessible. Apple offers payment plans. Not loans, payment plans. iPhone for $33/month sounds vastly more accessible than $799 upfront. This is mental accounting at work. Consumers segment the cost into monthly expenses rather than a single large purchase, reducing payment pain. They also offer trade-ins. You can trade your old iPhone and reduce the cost of the new one. This serves multiple purposes. It gets old devices back into Apple's ecosystem, they refurbish and resell, it reduces the psychological cost of upgrading, and it removes competitor devices from circulation. Let's address a common misconception. Apple products are overpriced. Are they? An iPhone 15 Pro costs approximately $520 to manufacture, including components, assembly, and shipping. Apple sells it for $999. That's a 48% gross margin. High. Yes. But is the phone worth $999? Worth is subjective. It's not cost plus pricing, it's value-based pricing. Apple charges what the market will bear based on perceived value, not production cost. And clearly, hundreds of millions of people believe the value exceeds the price. Moreover, Apple products retain value better than competitors. An iPhone depreciates approximately 40 to 50% over 2 years. A comparable Android phone depreciates 60 to 70%. Factor in resale value, and the total cost of ownership becomes competitive. This is premium pricing done correctly. It's not about being expensive, it's about being worth it. The retail revolution. In 2001, retail analysts predicted Apple stores would fail. Gateway had tried computer retail stores and closed them. Dell sold direct online. Everyone said specialty retail for computers was dead. Apple opened their first 2 stores anyway, one in Virginia, one in California. Today, those stores are temples of brand religion. Let's analyze what Apple did differently. First, location. Apple doesn't open stores in cheap locations. They open in premium locations. Fifth Avenue in New York, Champs-Élysées in Paris, Orchard Road in Singapore. These aren't just retail spaces, they're brand statements. The rent is astronomical, but the message is clear. Apple belongs among luxury brands. Second, experience design. Apple stores aren't stores, they're showrooms and community spaces. You can walk in, use the products, stay for an hour, and never be pressured to buy. Try that at a Carrier store or Best Buy. The genius of this approach: low-pressure environments increase conversion. When people feel comfortable, they buy. The Genius Bar was revolutionary. Free technical support, no appointment required initially, staffed by trained technicians. This transformed customer service from a cost center into a brand differentiator. Customers developed loyalty because Apple took care of them post-purchase. Third, staff training. Apple invests heavily in retail employee training. They don't teach selling techniques. They teach product knowledge and problem solving. The approach is consultative, not transactional. Employees are trained to ask questions, understand needs, and recommend solutions. This builds trust. Fourth, architectural iconography. Apple stores are designed by the same architects who design museums. Glass staircases, minimalist interiors, abundant natural light. The Sydney Opera House store, the Dubai Mall store, the Singapore Marina Bay Sphere. These are architectural landmarks. People visit them as destinations, not just retail locations. The financial performance is extraordinary. Let me give you numbers. Apple's retail stores generate approximately $50 billion in annual revenue. That's roughly the same as all of Nike's global revenue. And remember the metric I mentioned earlier, $5,500 in sales per square foot annually. The typical shopping mall store does $300, $400. But here's what most people miss. The stores aren't primarily revenue generators, they're brand fortresses. Apple stores serve multiple strategic functions. Customer acquisition. People who've never owned Apple products can touch and experience them. Customer retention, the Genius Bar, and today at Apple Sessions keep customers engaged. Brand control. Apple controls the narrative, presentation, and experience completely. Data collection. In-store interactions provide insights into customer preferences and pain points. Product launches. Stores create event experiences that generate media coverage and social proof. Consider product launches. When a new iPhone releases, lines form outside Apple stores globally. This isn't just sales, it's theater. The images of lines circulate on social media and news outlets, creating buzz worth millions in equivalent advertising. Apple also pioneered the Today at Apple program, free educational sessions, teaching photography, music creation, coding, and design using Apple products. This isn't sales, it's community building, but it deepens ecosystem engagement and converts curious visitors into customers. Let's compare with competitors. Microsoft tried replicating Apple stores. So did Samsung. They look similar, minimalist design, hands-on products, trained staff, but they lack the cultural cachet. Why? Because the store experience is downstream of brand positioning. Apple built stores after establishing themselves as a premium brand. Competitors built stores hoping to become premium brands. Causation matters. The stores also serve as physical proof points of Apple's financial success. A company that can afford flagship real estate in the world's most expensive locations signals we are winning. It's conspicuous corporate success. The innovation paradox. Here's a controversial statement. Apple is not the most innovative tech company, yet they're the most valuable. How? Because Apple doesn't innovate first, they innovate right. Let's examine the evidence. MP3 players existed before the iPod. Creative Labs, Diamond Multimedia, and others had products on the market, but they were clunky, hard to use, and had terrible software. Apple launched the iPod in 2001 with a scroll wheel interface and iTunes integration. It wasn't first, it was best. Smartphones existed before the iPhone. BlackBerry dominated. Windows Mobile had been around for years. Nokia had touchscreen devices, but they were all compromised. Apple launched the iPhone in 2007 with a full touchscreen, no physical keyboard, and an intuitive interface. It wasn't first, it was transformative. Smartwatches existed before the Apple Watch. Pebble, Samsung, and others had products. They were gadgets for early adopters. Apple launched the Apple Watch in 2015 with health focus, fashion positioning, and ecosystem integration. It wasn't first, it's now 50% of the global smartwatch market. Tablets existed before the iPad. Microsoft had tablet PCs for years. They failed. Apple launched the iPad in 2010 and created the modern tablet category. Do you see the pattern? Apple's innovation strategy is wait, watch, learn from others' mistakes, then execute flawlessly. This is often called fast follower strategy, but that's reductive. Apple is a perfecting innovator. They let others explore the technology, identify the use cases, discover the problems, then Apple solves those problems with superior design, integration, and marketing. Steve Jobs had a term for this. We don't ship junk. Apple would rather be late and right than early and wrong. This contrasts sharply with companies like Samsung or Google who adopt a spray and pray approach, launch many products, see what succeeds. Samsung has launched dozens of smartphone models, wearables, and form factors. Most fail, but occasionally one hits, like the Galaxy Note series, which created the phablet category. Apple's approach is the opposite. Few products, each meticulously refined. Apple currently has fewer than 20 active product lines. Samsung has hundreds. This focus allows Apple to concentrate resources. When they develop a feature like Face ID, promotion displays, or the dynamic island, they perfect it before shipping. Critics call Apple followers. They're wrong. Apple is disciplined. The lesson here is critical. Innovation without execution is worthless. The value isn't in being first, it's in being best. Brand as moat. Warren Buffett, who owns approximately 6% of Apple, has said the brand is the moat. What does this mean? A moat in business strategy is a sustainable competitive advantage, something that prevents competitors from eroding your market position. For castles, moats were water barriers. For businesses, moats are structural advantages. Apple's moat is brand. Brand operates at multiple levels. First, brand awareness. Apple is one of the most recognized brands on earth. The logo is instantly identifiable without text. That level of awareness took decades and billions in marketing to build. Competitors can't replicate it quickly. Second, brand associations. When you think Apple, what comes to mind? Innovation, design, quality, simplicity, premium. These associations are psychological assets worth billions. They predispose customers toward purchase and justify price premiums. Third, brand loyalty. Apple has cult-like customer devotion. People tattoo the logo on their bodies. They camp outside stores for product launches. This isn't rational consumer behavior, it's emotional attachment, and emotions are harder for competitors to disrupt than features. Fourth, brand extension. Because the Apple brand is so strong, they can enter new categories credibly. When Apple launched the Vision Pro mixed reality headset at $3,499, people didn't dismiss it as absurd. They assumed Apple knew something others didn't. That's brand equity at work. Compare this to even excellent companies like Sony or LG. They make quality products, but they lack the brand strength to command Apple-level pricing or loyalty. The brand is the moat, and it's nearly impossible to breach. Let's synthesize what we've covered. Apple is a $3 trillion company, not because they make the best technology, though often they do, but because they've architected a business model with compounding strategic advantages. One, ecosystem lock-in creates customer retention above 90%, turning one-time buyers into lifetime customers. 2. Vertical integration delivers superior margins, faster iteration, and competitive barriers others can't breach. 3 premium pricing psychology positions Apple as aspirational, not transactional, maintaining margin when competitors slash prices. 4 retail stores function as brand fortresses, controlling customer experience and generating extraordinary revenue per square foot. 5 disciplined innovation focuses resources on perfecting products rather than proliferating mediocre ones. 6 brand strength compounds over time, creating a moat competitors cannot easily cross. These aren't isolated tactics, they're interconnected systems. The ecosystem enhances the brand. The brand justifies the premium pricing. The premium pricing funds the retail experience. The retail experience strengthens the ecosystem. It's a flywheel. Now, here's what you need to understand. These principles apply beyond Apple. They apply beyond technology. Lesson 1. Build ecosystems, not products. How can your offerings interconnect to create compounding value and retention? Lesson 2. Control what matters. Vertical integration isn't about controlling everything, it's about controlling the elements that create competitive advantage. Lesson 3. Price for value, not cost. If you compete on price, you've already lost the brand battle. Lesson 4. Experience compounds. Every customer touchpoint either strengthens or weakens your position. There is no neutral. Lesson 5. Patience beats speed. Being first matters less than being right. Apple's success is built on disciplined execution, not reckless innovation. Lesson 6. Invest in brand. It's the only asset that appreciates with time if managed correctly. Apple's strategy isn't magic. It's discipline, consistency, and long-term thinking in a world obsessed with quarterly results. The companies that will dominate the next decade won't be those with the most features, the lowest prices, or the fastest growth. They'll be those that build sustainable strategic advantages, ecosystem lock-in, vertical integration, brand equity that compound over time. Apple is your case study. The question is, what are you building that will still matter in 10 years?